baking warriors, welcome back to my channel. For all returning subscribers, thank you so much for your support, and for all new subscribers, welcome to my channel where I share simple homemade recipes that you can make from the comforts of your home or bakery or kitchen with materials already available to you. On this week's episode, I'll be talking about weaver paper feathers. If you've missed the previous episode, please click on the link below this video or the link above this video for a playlist of the series. Now, I'm making use of a template I made myself, a rough hand sketch. You can get the downloadable and printable copy in the link below this video. Weaver paper glue, blush brush, plier, a pair of scissors, my cutouts from my weaver papers that I use in making my glue, paper towel, an artistic paintbrush, florist wire. This is gauge 18 or size 18, and then of course weaver papers. I'm making use of plain weaver papers, and these are edible. Now, if you have been following my weaver paper series, you will know by now that weaver papers have two sides, the rough edge and the smooth edge. For this particular video, we're not going to be concerned about which of the edges we'll be making use of. So the first thing I'm going to do is to get my template, and I'm going to place it on my weaver paper, or place my weaver paper on my template, and I'm going to cut out. You can use your pair of scissors to cut out, or an edible marker to trace and cut out, but I'm going to be using a pair of scissors to first of all cut out a size of the weaver paper template, just like this, and I'm going to be needing 3 of this cut out. And depending on how full you want your feathers to be, you can make 4 cutouts like this, 4 stripes, 4 rectangular stripes like this, or 5 or 6. But make sure your pairs of scissors are very sharp. Also, while trying to make the rectangular stripes, please make sure you are not breaking your weaver paper, because at this point they are not pliable. So in today's episode too, I'll be teaching you how to make your weaver paper pliable using a steaming method. You can either use a cake steamer, or you can use a steam from boiling water, which I'm going to be using. The next thing, I got one of the rectangular stripes, place it on my template, and I'm just going to cut out with my pair of scissors. This is quite simple. Follow the step-by-step process and you're going to get it. Once you are through with that, get your other rectangular stripes and also use the first template to trace and cut out. So now I have 3 templates that I'm going to use for my feathers. I'm going to pack my straps, my weaver paper straps. I'm going to keep them away for making weaver paper glue next time. Now, if you've not still gotten my copy of Ultimate Guide for Working with Edible Weaver Paper, please check the link below this video to get access to yours. It contains a load of tips for both novice and pro or professionals who have been making use of weaver papers. Now, I got my florist wire, placed it on my weaver paper feather template, and I left about 3 to 4 inch. Then I'm cutting out with my plier. Make sure when you're cutting your florist wire, you keep your hands down so that the florist wire doesn't fly and injure someone, or even get yourself injured. Next, I got my weaver paper glue, and make sure you are not going to apply too much. You don't want to soil your weaver papers. First, I'm going to bend my florist wire so that my feathers have a kind of curve once it's ready. Now I'm going to apply the weaver paper glue just to the center, straight down to the center like this. of my template. You're not applying it to the sides, just the center, the middle, and then I'll place my finger on it, on the florist wire, for 1 to 2 minutes so that it sticks to the weaver paper. It won't even get up to 2 minutes, just one minute to stick to the weaver paper. And this is ready. Next, I'm going to get the second template and I'm going to apply my weaver paper glue still to the florist wire. Remember, just at the center. And I'll place the second template on it and press it down or hold it down for a minute so it sticks to the florist wire. This is quite simple. If you notice that there is excess glue on your artistic paint brush, just dust it off on a paper towel. Now I'm going to do the same process for the third template. If you are making 4 or 5, if you have 4 or 5 cutouts, repeat the same process. Like I said, the rough or the plain side of a weaver paper doesn't matter here. Just apply it, press the center down a little for a minute and it sticks. Then we go to the next step. Please remember that while doing this, you don't want your weaver paper breaking, so you have to be careful. Clean up any excess weaver paper glue on your work surface as you work. Repeat the same process and this is ready. The next thing I'm going to be doing is to be making slanted cutouts, thin cutouts. We're trying to create feathers, so we're going to make slanted cutouts. And when you are doing this cutout, you're only going to be cutting to almost the center of your feather, not to the center, but almost at the center. You shouldn't get to the florist wire, just almost at the center, and it should be thin. It looks more realistic when the slanted cutouts are thin. Repeat it for both sides. In less than 10 minutes, you've created your weaver paper feathers, which you can apply on your cakes. Make sure you don't break them, you don't break your feathers, because this is not pliable yet. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm trying to make my feather look more realistic. So I'm going to create a little cut like this, like remove some slanted cuts deliberately so that the feather looks real. And this is ready. Remember that when you're clearing your work surface, you should not throw away your weaver paper straps. They are very useful for making weaver paper glue. Now I'm making 2 feathers because I want to place this on a cake. Now, like I said, I'm going to teach you how to make use of a steaming method. But if you don't have a cake steamer, which is not really available for everyone and it's a little bit expensive, you can use the steam. Make use of the steam from boiling water. So this water has been boiling. I'm just going to hold my weaver paper over it. The feather, I'm just going to hold it over it just like this. Hold it over it. And then that steam is going to make my weaver paper pliable. It's going to make the feather pliable. You can do this too for when you make butterflies or some designs like ruffles with weaver papers. It works well. It gives you a pliable weaver paper in minutes. And don't worry, it's not going to spoil your weaver paper. Your weaver paper is going to get back to the dry state it was in a minute or 2. Now I'm just using a skewer to separate the feathers from one another. Remember that we have 3 templates, as in 3 layers here. So I'm just using the skewer. You could also use the tip of a pastry or artistic paintbrush to separate each of the layers from one another, just to make it look real. So you can see this is pliable. If you did this when the weaver paper were not pliable, they will break. So that's the reason why we have to steam it to make it pliable before we start working. Now, if you don't want to make it all white like this, if you don't want your feathers to be all white, then you can dust your feathers with a luster dust of your choice, any color of your choice, or powdered color of your choice using your blush brush. That's the reason why I made a second template, so that your weaver paper looks different, not just white. So I'm using a powdered color here, and then once I'm through dusting, I go to the process of steaming it, and your feathers are ready. I steam and then separate it with my skewer or paintbrush, and it's also ready. So the same process. At this point, dearest new viewers, I think this is the right time for you to subscribe to my channel. Hit the notification bell to be notified of all my simple recipes once every week. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for subscribing, and see you next week.